too big.
Yo,
and we're live.
We're in. Here we go. Better late than never. We're back. This time, no war. While we've been going, there's some interesting goings on in that. We'll probably talk about that a little bit. Man, what a crazy time to be alive. I had to book off. What do you guys? Before we get going here, what did I miss? 4th of July. Country had another birthday.
Country had another birthday. One of the things that I really liked is I'm surprised that based off of yesterday's news, Epstein killed himself shortly after he would have been found innocent because of lack of evidence. That there was no trafficking. He didn't commit a crime, so he was about to be absolved, and it's a shame he killed himself.
Yeah, we will cover that today. We will. At some point we will have to find a way to work that in. What's up, Jeffrey? Hey, some interesting things to cover. We're going to talk about Jeffrey Epstein's suicide, among other things, and we're going to cover some other topics of interest. Jake, you got us started with the. Let me see here. What was that you sent me? We talked about that we started with last time, and we ended with last time. What's up, Jeffrey? Glad to have you here. So we talked about right at the end. You asked me about falsification and science, and we want to talk about plausible reasoning. And by the way, that will be the lens through which. Hey, what's up, Katie? That will be the lens through which we address a lot of the craziness. And I also want to throw in, Jake, you're going to love this. I saw this. I couldn't help myself. It's Sevi's channel, but so I have to. Is a lot of the. We'll talk a little bit about what's going on at the games. I've been tripping over athletes, and
you can barely even see the brown on Josh's nose there, man.
Josh's. That's it. I recommend. That looks like. Now I was going to say that picture almost looks like it's at the ranch, but it looks like there might be too much greenery. Oh no. Jeff, you told your brother about the Luttrell brothers. He was heartbroken. Yeah. Hey, I found that out. When I found it out, I was somebody else. I don't remember where I was when someone told me. I was like, come on. And of course, somebody had told me right before, I think, that it came out that Morgan Luttrell, Texas congressman. Is that right, Jeffrey? He's a Texas congressman, right?
I believe so.
Yeah, I think it's Texas. And that he had subbed in for Marcus Luttrell, and that was well known and among the teams. That was kind of Marcus Luttrell's claim to fame, is that he was busted up and had to leave. So yeah, I'm sorry to do that to you, Jeffrey. Did you let him know also your brother-in-law that no Easter Bunny either? I hope he wasn't too bummed out about that. But yes, he can put all the teeth he wants under the pillow and. Yeah. In any event, so we pick up with we'll pick up with this. Your question to me.
Let me back up just a little bit so I can. Often I'm very argumentative on this thing. I'm actually fairly open to persuasion, and the last time it was a couple episodes back, you said Karl Popper and falsibility, not part of science. And
no, I didn't say not part of science, but I say it's not science.
It's not science. I wouldn't say I'm a fan of Karl Popper. I've read some of his work. I'm a big fan of some of it. I'm not saying that I understand it deeply or completely. Yeah. There's just some aspects I've touched on.
Yeah.
But the thing with the falsibility that I've always gone back to is like when it comes to anthropomorphic global warming, it's not falsifiable.
Right.
And that was one of the things I stood on was like, well, I think that is science because of that. But then after reading your paper, you're like, no, testability. And I'm like, all right, so I'm conflating testability with it being falsifiable, and those may not be synonymous.
No, they're not.
And I think that's where we're going to pick the discussion up, is that like I was confused about that. I like to think I'm a little smarter than the average bear. So
let me fill in. And I'll tell you what Popper is. Let me say a few things about Karl Popper, which is he's awful. And if you've read the stuff and you've come away with it, if you've come away from what Popper wrote with something tangible,
I'd say most of my Popper is secondhand.
Yeah,
I've read some, but not extensively. like
Yeah,
this
and most people's is, and I'll tell you, Karl Popper is in many ways, and it's funny. It's the Greg refers to them as the Karls with K.
Right.
Karl Popper and Karl Marx. Karl Popper is to the philosophy of science what Karl Marx is to economics. Let me put it that way.
Okay.
And that may seem unduly harsh, but I will put in the chat, maybe not for the public, but if anybody wants to, I'll tell you this. There's a book, and in fact, it is published by the publisher and owner of the rights is the Broken Science Initiative, BSI.org, owns the rights to this book. It's called Scientific Irrationalism, Origins of a Postmodern Cult. And it's written by an Australian, now deceased, philosopher, professor by the name of David Stove. And David Stove is kind of one of these cult figures in philosophy. He was kind of an Australian crank, but he has now, I think, for many people, many of us who've read him, has come to be, yeah, that's the book, the nice blue. Yeah, Keith Winchell does the intro, and Keith Winchell recently passed away. Terrible loss. But yeah, Broken Science books. There you go. If you don't have a copy, it's worth having, and it's not a long book. It's pretty short. I don't think it's about 120, 30 pages, something like that. But it's heavy. It's thick reading. But in it, Stove does one of the great services to humanity, and it's really the Scientific Irrationalism book. He published it under 4 different titles, and it was really the last in a series of books where he was seeking to refute what we frequently call the inductive skepticism of David Hume. And so Hume, for those who don't know, he's kind of famous. You hear the name, is a Scottish philosopher in the Enlightenment and highly, highly influential. But Hume's inductive skepticism was essentially this. It goes like this. The induction can never tell us anything. And by induction, I want to be clear what I'm talking about. There are essentially, Hume and many others in the Enlightenment posited that there were only 2 ways of thinking about things, coming to know things. And those 2 ways were this. You could either deduce it, which is to say, logically deduce it in the form of, in a syllogism, in the form of if A, then B, if B, then C, and then, therefore D, kind of thing. That logical syllogism that probably most people are familiar with. Socrates is a man, all men are mortal, Socrates is immortal. That's the sort of quintessential deductive reasoning, right? And the other kind of reasoning is the kind that we all live with in our day-to-day life, which is experience. That's just the short induction is it, and the way Hume phrases it is, it's reasoning from the specific case more generally. So you can start with things like this. When you're very, very young, you learn at a very, very young age that you learn to extrapolate from a specific instance to all the instances that fit within that category. So, for example, you learn quickly if you make a certain noise, mom comes running and gives you food. And so shortly thereafter, whenever you're hungry, you start making that same noise and hoping mom's going to, deliver the goods or the boob or whatever, And so that is reasoning from the specific to the general. And Hume said that was completely improper, that we could, and his kind of, he became famous for saying, you could draw, and Hume was a radical anti-inductivist, I'll call him, and say this. Hume believed that you could draw no conclusions whatsoever about the future based on something that had happened in the past. And this was taken to its extreme to mean no one could say with certainty that the sun was going to rise tomorrow based on the fact that it had risen for 4.5 billion years or whatever they believed back in the Enlightenment. Now, you think about that for a second and you go, well, that sounds kind of crazy. Like if I said to you, you can't know with certainty that the sun is going to rise tomorrow, you would say, well, it's certain enough for me. What I mean, like, I don't know what sun you're looking at or what drugs you're taking.
Well, like with all science, what's the margin of error here? for our
okay. So
plus or minus what?
Right. Hume's inductive skepticism came to be viewed, and even today, I can run over to my bookshelf and pull a bunch of books off of the bookshelf that discuss this. But Hume's inductive skepticism became kind of this one of these kind of logical conundrums. It's almost like the old, Hume's inductive skepticism became kind of like the George Carlin, hey, Fada, can God create a rock so big that if God's all powerful, can he create a rock so big that he himself cannot lift it? It has all the merits of that exact kind of argument where on this, you think about it and you're like, oh, wow, that's really, I don't know, and it's sort of this logical conundrum. And one of the corollaries to it of Hume was that not only this, but that you could in no way argue with him without relying upon induction. So he's basically like, induction only justifies itself by induction. Therefore, it is illogical, it's tautological, it's circular, and therefore it's all bullshit. And so a lot of people during this same time, if you take that view, you would then say that, well, then that means that we can never progress. That if you can't learn anything from what happened in the past, well, then you can't learn anything. It's like every day starts anew, like fresh, and you have to learn everything all over again. This is, of course, commonly referred to as being fucking insane. If you don't believe you can learn anything, you're out of your mind.
Well, I've read several books about why Christianity was the only source of science ever. And one of the beliefs was like, when you deal with, my mind just went blank. In the philosophy of Christianity, that there are set rules that Christianity follows. Like these rules are unchanging. And like in Islam, the word of Allah is supreme. If he says it's going to be different tomorrow, it'll be different tomorrow. Therefore, you don't have to understand these set principles, these set rules, because the word of Allah can change that. And
well,
that led to them struggling with science.
Well, so the interesting thing about this was Hume said it, and everybody looked at him and said, David, that work like this is
put the beer down. Put the scotch down.
Put the scotch down, David. Here's the thing that people at the same time were talking, and there was this wound up being Hume's inductive skepticism is a big deal in Western philosophy. And one of the aspects to it was that at the same time, you have to remember that Hume said this. Hume came after Newton. And so Isaac Newton had already given us the Principia, whatever you want to, however it's pronounced in the Latin. Principia Mathematica. In fact, it's I got my copy right over there. I can see it from my shelf, but not on the fake bookshelf, on the actual bookshelf, which is just beyond the fake bookshelf that we've all come to know and love.
The offset real bookshelf, where the real tombs of knowledge are kept.
Where I hide all my secret knowledge. Now let me say, what the hell does stove have to do with any of this? Okay, so
I have one question.
Sure.
If inductive reasoning is illogical, what does Hume consider logic then?
This is a perfect question.
Like that was the first thing. Like, well, what the freak is logic then? What are we hanging our hat on here?
Hume's view was that the only logic that mattered was deductive logic. Hume's view was there are two kinds of logic: deductive logic and defective logic, and that's a steal from Greg. That's his way of putting it. And I think he might be getting that from Colin Housen on Hume and Colin Housen's book, Hume's Problem. But let me fast forward. So why do we care about any of this? Well, Karl Popper was a Humean, for lack of a better term. He took Hume's view that you could never know for certain if things were true. And let me just point out why this is so kind of crazy and it runs against everything that you and I probably know in our ordinary life, which is this. We don't make decisions based on 100% certainty. Like when you get up and you go outside and you look, you see clouds in the sky, you will make a decision about what you're going to do later that day, what you're going to wear, whether you're going to wear a coat or bring an umbrella or not, based on probabilistic thinking, which is to say you'll look and you'll make a kind of, rough estimate of, in all my experiences with clouds, staring up at those things, are those the kind that are going to put rain on me if I don't bring an umbrella and a jacket? Or is that just passing clouds and there's not going to be any rain? In other words, we do not operate in only the dichotomous world of either 1 or 0, certainty or nothing. And what Hume and along that same line of thinking, Popper did was they were so focused on science as delivering certainty. And a lot of this, David Stove writes all about this. And that's what that book is really about, is David Stove doing a dissection on Karl Popper. And here's the other part you need about Popper, why he's important. And then we'll get right to your thing about what is falsification then. But I'll tell you this. Basically,
I have a word to say about deduction reason before we get to that.
Right. So here's what needs to be understood about it with respect to Hume, Popper, and all of this is that Hume and Popper both were people who were, maybe by just their nature, obsessed with certainty. And both of them believed that science was in essence the things of which we were certain about. And they believe that the problem is that science as a body of knowledge, we can only get to deduction. The things we can deduce are only the things that we have sufficiently induced until we come to call them certain. In other words, if somebody said right now, unlike Hume, we didn't understand maybe the skies and the stars in our own galaxy and universe in quite the way Hume did. Laplace cleared a lot of that up after a post-Hume, I believe. But even still, in fact, they might have overlapped quite a bit. But the thing about it is we know now that the star is not, our star is not, it will be, it's the sun's going to rise tomorrow because we now understand the earth spins, moves around we understand all of those celestial mechanics. And we also understand that our class is our star is a, B class star, whatever it is. And because of what we've accomplished with telescopes, we've seen the entire life cycle of stars. And so we know that eventually our star is going to get larger and larger and larger and then collapse likely and go supernova, blah, 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 blah. So we understand so much more about the physical reality of that star that you would be an idiot today to suggest that the sun's not going to rise tomorrow. And that's because it has been, this is the great work of George Polya, who I've been reading a lot. Anybody who wants to go to the abject lesson will find 11 chapters of me talking about this subject in Plausible Reasoning, that series, which is what kind of got us down this road. So let me clarify what falsifiability does do, where it is valuable.
Before you get into that, can I just say a few words about deduction?
Sure, please.
So I've been doing a lot of, I was telling Jay before we got started, I've been doing a lot of work on writing about the ego development, ego stages. And deductive reasoning strikes me as the divinity of the mind. That what is divine to that person is their ability to reason, and that the ultimate abject measure of reality and the definition of reality is how they think about it. And that creates a class that your mind is the divine thing. And it's always wonderful to me when I talk to these people and go, how many times have you analyzed, reasoned your way into a plan, into a position, into doing something, and it's failed with zero change on your part? Yet your intuition, your feelings fail you one time and you immediately abandon those. And that's what I see in that deductive reasoning is like, what is most supreme in the universe is how I think.
Well, okay. Well, it's funny you go there. William Briggs, who those who may not know, he's a big writer, and he's got a great Substack, and I happen to know him. Greg knows him. I was introduced to him by Greg. He's a brilliant statistician. He's one of the first people to really meet cancellation at the hands of. He's a statistician, but his specialty was in climate modeling. Mm-hmm. And wouldn't you know, like early on, he got a university position, and I think at the same time something he had written got published, and it was essentially that science is not falsifiability. And Briggs has written some great books. I know Jay knows him; he's met him. Uncertainty is probably his great work. I would consider that his magnum opus, Uncertainty, and it covers a lot of the things I'm saying. But here's where falsifiability is useful. Falsifiability is necessary for something in science to be considered a meaningful proposition.
Okay.
But it in no way encompasses all of science. So to the extent you are correct to say that it's necessary for a proposition to be falsifiable to call itself science, but it's not sufficient. Do you get that now? So
I get that.
So Popper was right only in the small way of saying that falsifiability is one piece of what's necessary for something to constitute science, a proposition, to be a scientific proposition, which is it has to be falsifiable. It has to, and by that I mean it has to admit that there are conditions under which, if we tested this proposition, we could determine, you would agree that if X happens, then I'm wrong. And if Y happens, that makes it more likely I'm right. You know what I mean? And so, so falsifiability is really, and Greg gave me this term, I love this. It's what's necessary for a meaningful scientific proposition, but it is in no way the be all and end all of scientific propositions. So let me give you a good example why. And this is where we come to at the heart of science. Science is not about certainty. It's about managing uncertainty. And that is to say, and Greg understood this, and I understood this. We both had from the same source in many ways, his old man, which was Greg worked in radar. People don't know that. He had a little internship at Hughes Aircraft Company. The old man tried to get him to work there, but instead he was bound and determined to cut his teeth in fitness. Much to his old man's chagrin, but he said that
seemed to have turned out okay.
Yeah, it seemed to have turned out okay for him. But he finds himself back in this subject really as a legacy of his old man, who I had a chance to work with as well. I did a missile shoot with him before I ever met Greg. Neither of us knew. We found that out at the games one day. I was talking to his old man, and I was talking about a missile shoot. He heard me, and he was like, "That was my project. Sidearm missile was his project." And then we started talking, and I was talking about a missile shoot I did in California, and as I was in 94, August of 94, and as I was talking to him, I started thinking about, I was like, yeah, we had this technician out there who came out to set up the radar, and then I was looking at his dad, and I'm like, oh shit. He was like, that was me. And he knew instantly, I knew, we both knew, he was like, the missile went stupid. And I was like, yeah, nobody who hadn't been there would have known that, he knew. So I had actually met a glassman before I ever met Greg, and it was his dad. But his dad was as some people may or may not know, I don't know, his dad was a rocket scientist. And one of the things he understood, he had a keen understanding of science and science education. And it was because of radar, which is, in a typical radar, for example, in an aircraft radar.
Signal versus noise.
Yeah, it's signal versus noise. And not only that, it's signal versus noise, but in a probabilistic way. In other words, at 200 miles, 30% chance it's a target, 70% chance it's a flock of birds. At 150 miles, 50% chance it's target, 50% chance it's birds. At 100 miles, it's 75%. That's an incoming bogey. Birds don't move like that. And so what radar builds into your brain is it builds on the same processes that we all do, which is we all kind of triangulate our reality around our own hypotheses about how the world is ordered. And this is a wonderful thing to learn. And this applies to anything. It applies to your feelings about your wife or girlfriend or your dog.
Well, when you talk about reality and triangulation, it's quintillation. The way that we determine that something is real is that more than one of our senses can sense it. That we are at all times triangulating reality itself. Hey, I see something, I reach out to touch it, I don't feel anything. That's not real.
Yeah, it's a hallucination,
It's
whatever.
a mirage. Hey, I hear something, I look, there's nothing there. It's not real, or we're being fooled. But for the most part, you say that triangulation, that is literally why we have multiple senses, is so that we can overlay those senses to figure out, is this reality or am I hallucinating?
Yeah, am I talking to the noises in my head? Which, by the way, we'll come back to this, I'm sure, again and again, but which is part of the issue with artificial intelligence right now. AI is, you can't quite be certain.
Air can be felt on their skin. It can be smelled. So I mean, it crosses two things.
Yeah, but you can't see it. I mean, you can see the consequences of it.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So it's a yes.
And you feel it you can feel it passing over your hand as you wave through.
Right. But you can't see it, but you can see other things of it, which is all a wonderful way of saying that deduction, for people who crave certainty, however, the only form of knowledge that they believe in is the deductive kind. And you find this among very smart people. It's not tied to IQ. A lot of it.
I'll say it's not tied to IQ, but it is tied to ego development. That as your ego develops, and again, I'm going to jag for this because this is what I've been working on.
No, I think
when you're at a lower level of ego development, like, you don't have the ability to deal with uncertainty because you're already on edge about everything else. That you're in that constant fight or flight state. And if they're in that state of constant fight or flight, like just the vicissitudes of life are too overwhelming for them. And then if they're brilliant on top of that and have to take into account their own mortality, well, that's just too much to deal with.
Yeah, not just mortality, uncertainty. And I'll tell you, and we've talked about this in different contexts, but this is what.
It's also one of the reasons I despise our school system, is that it reinforces being right.
Yes.
Hey, there is one answer and it's the right answer. And the more that you get out into the world, it's like, no, there's not one right answer. There's more skillful and there's less skillful. And what is it we're trying to accomplish?
Right.
And most people have no idea what they're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, school has become largely the regurgitation of accepted facts. And we can't understand why we've got that same sort of problem more broadly in the country. Is the public education system has turned knowledge into the regurgitation of facts. And it's funny, we've got more information than we've ever had available, and unquestionably, in my mind, less wisdom and less serious thought about things. And all of that is based on, Briggs will say, we have an epidemic of over certainty. We have an absolute epidemic, and not enough, to your point, humility, which is to say, and when you really talk to people who I've had a chance to meet with some icons of science. Like, how often do you get a chance to meet a guy who's got an element of the periodic table named after him? And I talked about that before, and we joked about it. But, for those who don't know, Glenn Seaborg, there is an element, Seaborgium, in the periodic table, and Seaborgium was named for Glenn T. Seaborg, and I had a chance to I had to compete, was interviewed by him, and then later got a chance to meet him. He was a section chief on the Manhattan Project, so he worked directly for Oppenheimer. And it was funny, it was strange, because he was so obviously brilliant, so just a capacious mind. But what struck me was he gave a lecture near the end of the competition. I met him at the Westinghouse Science Talent Search. He was one of the judges in '87. And one of the interesting things was he had the old Kodachrome slide deck, and it was from the Manhattan Project. So he had Kodachrome slides of his work on the Manhattan Project. It was amazing. And
JV, you're going to have to pull up a slide projector for some people. Like Dale and I know what a slide projector is, and I remember slide shows back when I was a kid. But I'm sure there's a lot of people listening who have. See, when we say slides, it's not a PowerPoint slide. There used to be this actual.
It's photograph. An actual physical little things, and they went in a little tray. And
Yep.
yeah, he had slide
that's a story.
trays.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yep, this is an actual. Yes, there. Boom. There we go.
They never looked that good though. That's clearly a modern one.
Yeah. The ones that we saw, but they were. I mean, they look just like that, but
they did not nearly as slick.
No, they had a lot more dust and hair all over them and things like
70s,
that. But
70s, 60s refinement to them.
Right, but he had slides and some of them, I don't know if I've said this before, but it was crazy because he had ones like when they were taking one of the bombs, the original. The Trinity out to the Trinity site to detonate the first bomb, which you see in the movie. They do quite well in Oppenheimer. For those who haven't seen it, they do a great scene depicting that. But what was really interesting, I asked him, I was the one who asked him, like, hey, what did you guys think? And he was remarkably humble about, they had no certainty. Nobody had ever detonated an atomic bomb before. How could you be certain about it?
Right.
And I asked him, what the sense was. I don't remember how I worded the question as a high school senior, but I'll tell you, I couldn't believe he was just like, I don't know, we didn't know, He said a lot of things that would make you think like, what? You guys were handling uranium and you didn't know, like, what the hell were you doing?
Right.
But he was remarkably humble, and I'll tell you, the Japanese kids really put him to the test. They had some hard questions to ask, but some of the Japanese kids, whose parents who probably or grandparents had lived through it.
It's one of those things that, again, in this work, do a lot of definition terms that confidence and humility are paired together.
Yeah.
And confidence is knowing that you can accomplish the task. I'm not guessing. I know I can do this. That's why I'm confident. Right. Humility is knowing where that ends.
Oh, I like that.
Humility is, and the more accomplished I see of people, the more clearly humble they are about, they'll go, I'm not sure about that. We need to ask somebody. And like, I've had people like, hey, you're probably top 20 in the world at this. And like, we need to go ask somebody else. It's like, yeah, we do. That's not really my area of specialty.
Right.
Let's go talk to this guy over here. And you're like, oh, I should probably shut up about a lot of things in my life.
That is a great way of conceiving of humility and confidence. I really like that. I'm going to steal that, which is to say,
well, arrogance is not realizing either.
Right.
When you see somebody arrogant, they think they're capable of something, and everybody else is like,
not so sure about that.
Nah, man, for sure that's not.
Yeah,
that's a hard no. I'm gonna take the short money on this.
Yeah, and that is but the idea that humility should be, in essence, is the ability to honestly recognize where your confidence should start to wane.
Yeah. I don't know. Like, I don't know.
And I'll tell you, I think a lot of this is a cultural artifact. I don't know if you probably remember this, but it used to be for men, like when I was young and growing up, not just my dad, but like everybody's dad, was no one. It was sort of society wide. No dad ever admitted they were wrong. Well, I mean, it was incredibly rare.
You'd rather stay lost for an hour than ask for directions. I just pull over and ask for directions. I will chop my left hand off before we pull over and ask for directions.
I had a flight instructor when we on like my fifth flight. It was a great line. Now it was a little later than that. It was one of my off-wing flights, but so maybe FAM 8 or something. But one of the procedures that was like a demo was the lost procedures. Like what do you do if you're in a plane and you're lost? Like you can't pull over and get directions. You can't. We're not going to get gas, so we got to make some decisions here, right?
Yeah.
And it was the 5 season. It was like climb, conserve. So you climb to get altitude, get a better, set max conserve. As soon as you're like, I don't know where I am, start saving fuel. Pull back to max conserve, whatever that setting is on the power control lever. Boom. So climb, get altitude, conserve, save your fuel. And then I think the third step was confess. And it was come up on the radio and be like, hey, we're lost. We need, can we get vectors or whatever? So I'm flying, right? And the instructor goes, all right, we're lost. What do we do? And I've got the controls. I'm flying. He's like, all right, we're lost. Where do we go? And I'm like, oh, sir, first, climbing, setting max conserve, I'm doing all this while I'm talking. I'm like, all right, and I'm coming up on the radio to confess. And he goes, breaks right over me, just stomps on me with his ICS switch. And he's like, we will never, ever, I'm just telling you this, we will never come up on this radio and use the word lost. And he says, we will be a smoking hole in the ground before we ever come up. You understand me, Lieutenant? And I was like, oh, yes, sir. I absolutely am. We will not come up with. He's like, we will come up with anything else. We will auger this friggin' plane into the ground, but we are not coming up and admitting we are lost.
Right.
And I just thought that was like one of my favorite moments of flight school. I was like, all right, I get it. But
right.
So yeah,
do you mind if I get on the radio and hit him with a little razzle dazzle about?
Right.
Hey, guys, just hypothetically, if I was looking over my left shoulder, what kind of scenic things would I see over here?
Hey, a related lost story. I was coming back on a flight one time, and there was a Saudi student in front of me. And we had a handful of Saudi students in our class. We went through AI with the aviation indoctrination, and we had some other international students too, like some Italians. We had those guys were funny at the pool. First day in the pool, right? We all show up in the pool. We're in like our standard board shorts, and like there were like a dozen
they're marble bags.
Oh my God, you should have seen it. We're all sitting in the stands ready. A bunch of Marines. We'd all been to infantry school together. We're all sitting there, sitting rigidly at attention while we're in the bleachers, and we're already there. And the like 8 or 9 Italian dudes come walking in their banana hammocks for pool day, and we are like, oh my God, we are howling like.
Looks like they're smuggling squirrels in.
Yeah, no lack of body hair either, which I was. But in any event, with that image now firmly in everyone's brain, it's confidence is that's a great way of describing it. You should be confident about the things you are certain. But I would say that
I have capability. I do not have capability. I have knowledge. I do not have knowledge. And
no fear in saying
what's the plus minus on my skill set here.
No fear in in not being an expert, except of course on the internet where everybody knows everything. Right. So there we are. So there's stove and there's falsifiability.
It's not Murphy's Law, but like the fastest way to get an answer on the internet is to give the wrong answer and then wait for somebody. Like if you ask the question, nobody's going to help you. But if you just give the wrong answer, then everybody is jump on it to correct.
No lack of the people to come on and actually to where you need to go. So there's that.
And if somebody would like to get in the comments and correct me on that so that I have the right answer, that would be.
Yeah, that's right.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah, falsifiability. No, it's close. It's part of it, but for sure you're in the range. All right. The other one we wanted to talk about was I saw something, and you may find this interesting. I saw an interview. Well, I should say this. I saw a clip of an interview being given by Annie Thorisdottir. And in that clip, she's talking about, the conditions under which she competed. And it looks a bit to me like, kind of piling on about how dangerous the CrossFit Games were. And she's referencing an event at the 11 Games. And I think Matt Souza, she was like, there was no water and this and that. And she was making it sound like, CrossFit was trying to kill people with the games. And this is all in the context of that unfortunate Lazar who passed away swimming, died while competing at the games. And sure enough, Souza with the epic takedown. JV, did you see that takedown that Souza had of Annie and everybody's piling on? And
I did. Yeah. You want me to pull it up?
Yeah, I mean, for the CrossFit community, we're talking to that crowd, and I was
by the way, what I was referring to earlier is called Cunningham's Law. The best way to get the right answer on the internet is not to ask a question, but to post the wrong answer.
There you go, Cunningham's Law. I like that.
Yeah.
So
which the fastest way to find out it's Cunningham's Law is to call it Murphy's Law, and then someone will.
That's right. Murphy's Law of the internet. So it was interesting to me anyway, as a person I was working for CrossFit at the time as their general counsel, although Games had by then kind of morphed, and I think Steve Weiss had come on and the Games had kind of become its own entity, more or less. But I just found it interesting that here we are. Somebody made a comment like, man, I really miss the old days, kind of. Yeah, go ahead and run this just because why not? I saw this and I couldn't resist. No audio.
No idea.
Yeah, I don't know how that happens. And anyway, Matt Souza pointing out, some people not telling full truth about, the dangers of the games. But I want to bring everybody, at least the modern CrossFitters, back to this. Oh, you got it?
The 2015 CrossFit Games when she did Murph here.
I'm navigate, I'm stumbling, I'm falling, I'm like, what is happening? And like they get my body temperature, like, and no one is allowed to drink water, by the way, which I think is absolutely insane. Yeah. So
you can't have water during that entire time.
Apparently there were coolers there that had water in it. Not know then. That you were allowed to just go and get water from there. Frederick tried to give me water. Some in the audience tried to give me water, like when I'm running and I'm stumbling, they're trying to give me water, and it's like, no, not allowed to get anything. So it's like I just want something to pour over me,
I was thinking about that, and I was like, man, I wonder if there's any truth to what she's claiming. I wonder if we could just go back and, I don't know, check the footage, right? Maybe we can just see what happened at the 2015 Murph Games. And weirdly enough, we pulled this clip up right here.
But they did get the body armor off of her before they brought her out. So they did see her again brought out of the stadium, get on the stretcher right behind her.
That's weird. I just thought that she said they didn't have water. And when people tried to give her water and she just wanted to dump it on her head, it wasn't available. It wasn't there. Wow.
Yeah. So obviously there you can pull out JV. So the interesting thing about it is, number one, it's a good lesson, and the internet always has receipts. Number two is that, she's that huge disappointment, not necessarily surprising, whatever. But the thing about it that was interesting to me was the claim is the people defending the claim in the comments like, well, it is true that you couldn't get stuff from the audience because they had the drug testing going on. So they wouldn't let people give you any, the audience provide you, and then you start drinking it, because then later, if you fail the drug test,
there are rules about these things. Like I don't know if you've ever noticed in fight sports, if you see an athlete holding a can or a drink that isn't clear, it's empty. The only bottle that you can have inside of ring has to be completely clear.
Oh, well, you and I you're a boxer. You and I are old enough to remember and it's to me.
Yeah, Alexis Arguello. Give me the special bottle.
Give me the special bottle.
Give me the special bottle. Exactly. So, there are rules. So, like, could people from the stands hand her drinks? No, it's against the rules. Were there drinks available?
Yeah. Absolutely. And so the problem is, as a general internet thing, man, don't defend the indefensible, and don't try and play actually and what
this is another one of those things where, like, your pride, your ego will prevent you from admitting you're wrong. And most of the time, like I'm pretty sure I've said this on here before, most of us lie like we're in the third grade. Like, we're not good liars. We're not good. And it's not that we're like, oh, well, I got away with that. You didn't get away with it. Just, we didn't call you out on it. Like, hey, we didn't want to make that socially uncomfortable for everybody to tell you, like, hey, you're lying. That's super awkward. It's super obvious. You haven't fooled anyone. But one of the other things about society in general is, like, when you are honest about things, like, most people don't realize how easily people let go of it. There was I don't remember his name, the little NSYNC Backstreet Boy, whatever, I forget his name, Aaron something, that everybody thought was gay. Like, for a decade, everybody's like, this guy's gay, he's gay, he's gay, he's gay. He's like, nope, definitely not gay. And then one day he came out and was like, I'm gay. And everybody's like, all right, cool. And, like,
moving on.
Nobody. All right, our suspicions have been proven true, recognized, validated. Moving forward, like, we're okay with that. Yeah. And most people don't realize, like, just how easily, if you own your shit, man, it goes away super quick.
Yeah, honesty, truly. People say this, it's trite, but honesty is the best policy. It really is. Even if it's painful in the immediate term, you are so much better off.
Well, this is one of the few things where I do disagree with Kant and Samuel Harris on, like, being honest. I 100% believe in the truth, and honesty is I'm a little more flexible about it. And the one that I use is like, hey, the troopers are at the door and they want to know where the Jews are. What do you do?
Right.
You know, according to Kant and Sam Harris, the best you can do is remain silent. And in my view, I'm like, hey, hold on, fellas. Let me get my hat and my umbrella, and we're going to go find them. And, you know, take them on the world's, you know, grandest goose chase. And be completely delighted with myself,
Right.
you know, for my lack of honesty.
Well, and there's an interesting part.
But I have defended the truth.
Right. And there's an interesting part about that if you think about that scenario, which I really like, which is the idea that, well, the only thing you can do is silence, when we all know it's like
that's pretty damning.
Well, right. Not only that, but in the context of like Hans Landa there, you know, what's his face's character from the English, like, what are you going to say to that? Just stay silent, and that's going to get like, he's, you know what I mean? And
now
so
right.
And so there's a and more importantly, where everybody knows who's a party to that transaction, whether you're the person being questioned or the person doing the question, everybody knows what's sitting behind it is force.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, if you're not, they already suspect you, and so silence is going to get you tortured or shot in the head just as easily as you know, as lying. And so, to your point, like, hey, maybe this is the time where, given what the consequences are, where we would say consent there isn't real consent, it's all coerced anyway. That, like, to your point, well, if I'm going to get a bullet in the head for lying, I might as well do something effective here, and let's go, boys. You know, pretend as if I'm going along and take them in a hot air balloon and see.
Well, this is one of those things of morality that there's this famous photo in Nazi Germany where everybody, I'm not going to do the thing where everybody has their arm up, and there's one guy standing there.
Yeah, I know it. I love that. That's one of my favorite things of all. Like one of.
Yeah, that guy died 3 months later in a camp.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah, like he didn't make it long after that photo. Yeah. Meanwhile, there was another guy who was like, I don't know, I forget the exact title. He was like press secretary for Hitler, and was actually a double agent for Britain the entire time. And once the war was over, just completely wasn't tried, but you know, his name was complete mud, and his family didn't find out that he had been a double agent until he died. Which one of those two people is more moral?
Yeah. There's it's having worked
the guy who was a double agent the entire time, and then, you know, when the war came out, didn't go, surprise, I'm actually one of the good guys. Yeah. Just took it on the chin and lived his life.
Yeah. That's a I'll say this, having worked in that field, you know, it's the whole spy business depends on people who are willing to lie, and then if they get caught, tell another one. You know,
being duplicitous is difficult. You know, in the spirit world, we often talk about names mean things, and Jake's not my real name. Most people don't know that, but Jake means deceiver. It means trickster.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
My
real name means healer.
Oh, really?
So I trick people into healing.
Oh, I like it.
And it's one of those things that, like, if you are a trickster god, what are the rules about being a trickster? And the only rule that I was able to come up with that allows me to do what I do effectively and well, I'm never allowed to lie or deceive to benefit myself.
Yeah, I like, you know, you and I have a very trenchant example of this, which is when I went down to Mexico with you and ingested when I ingested those hallucinogenics for the first time, and then started crying and saying, I'm dying. Jake, what did you do to me?
And my reply, well, you probably didn't hear my reply, is I went like this and looked at the other shaman and was like, I may have forgot to mention that part. And
I was like,
the other shaman turns and looks at me. He's like, what? And I was like, I got him here, didn't I? I got him here. I did my job.
It all worked out in the end. Good for everybody.
I got you back. I got you back in your body.
Yeah.
You lived.
Yep. Brought me.
Yeah, different timeline, but sure.
Man, that was tough. So here we are. We've covered quite a bit. So the next thing is we had awards. Speaking of lying and deception, you know, we talked about this last time. nothing feels right about that Iran thing. And now I'm saying like, oh, we're going to be back at war again and all this. And I'll just say all of that related to what we're talking about is we have these pattern recognition mechanisms built into us.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times we can't fully articulate why something feels off to us because it's operating subconsciously and we've picked up or observed or noticed something and we haven't fully processed it yet, but it has set off alarm bells because it's our pattern recognition mechanisms have told us that this is out of pattern, whatever it is. And this talks about, this is the whole thing of, women's intuition, cheating spouses, whatever you want to call it. It has all of that is really other words for what amounts to. We are wired up with some incredibly powerful pattern recognition engines within us.
I'm going to say two things about that because I just made this comment to someone else, that the women's intuition of somebody cheating, like how I've got a women's intuition. It's like, yeah, where was your women's intuition the last 6 months when you were making them miserable?
Right. Right.
No intuition there, huh? And then the second thing is, like, when it comes to intuition, subconscious versus the conscious, when you do the math, it's 92,000 to 1. That is how much more powerful your subconscious is to your conscious mind. Yeah.
Indeed, many people have argued now that in fact we're not rational beings, but rationalizing beings, and that the conscious part of our mind is really the justification engine for what's going on subconscious.
I always like to think of it as like the White House press secretary, that our rational mind standing up there at the podium and goes, "We did what?
Right.
With her? Okay. All right. So what we did today,
right.
Let me
tap the microphone.
Right. So I'm going to need a minute to explain this. Okay. Yeah,
exactly.
That's where a rational mind does. We've done something and it's like, oh boy.
I do think we make rational decisions, but I will say this, that one of the, maybe as a coda to what I just said, that we've got these powerful pattern recognition engines going on, maybe in the background. Hold on, let me finish this thought though. But it's this, and the caveat is this: they're so powerful that they'll make patterns where there are none.
Right.
And that is where we are at. And back to our whole idea about that I talked about in the beginning with uncertainty, Briggs's book, with what you were talking about humility and confidence and all of that, is our pattern recognition machinery is so good that we can and will find patterns where there are none. And that is where we are apt to make our biggest, that's where we are apt to step on the garden hose, most loudly.
The garden rate. I'll say, when you say we do use reasoning, I think intuition in our subconscious gets us into the ballpark, gets us into the right ballpark, and that our reasoning gets us on base. Yeah. Like your reasoning, your intuition is going to get you in the general, hey, we're in the right area. And then your reasoning is going to get you, hey, now we need to move 30 feet over to this exact point. That many times people in life, because they haven't listened to their intuition, they're not even in the right ballpark. And then they're trying to use their reasoning like, well, how do I maximize or optimize where I'm at? It's like, well, you're not supposed to be there. Like you're not in the right ballpark. You're not even in the right county.
Yeah, it's there's a great shooting analogy there, which is our intuition probably gets us on the paper, and rational reasoning can help you dial in and get it to within the V ring kind of thing. Whereas you can be wildly wrong and not even on the paper, man, and wildly precise, and in your grouping and tight, and perfectly wrong.
I was shooting a USPSA match at night one time, and I had black sights. I did not have illuminated sights. Was shooting through a barrel at a 6 plate with black sights at night. Emptied all my magazines and did not clear that plate rack. It was one of the more embarrassing, like 76 freaking rounds, man. And still 2 plates left. I've never wanted to throw my gun down and like stomp off so much of my life.
we had a warrant
The
officer.
people around me felt bad. Like it was
Yeah.
like everybody, they wouldn't even roast me. That's how bad it was. I was like, if someone could just like talk shit to me for a couple minutes, I'd feel
It's too
better.
bad to even make fun of you over.
Yeah, they're like, oh, we can't.
Shooting at night is a. I'd love to talk to Dave about this sometime, but we when we were at infantry school, once you get like started on the range and you're everybody knows how to handle a rifle, and we've done a lot of live fire. They took us out to do our first night shoot, and they set us up in an ambush, our whole squad.
Mhm.
And everybody's got 2 magazines of 30 rounds each, so we know exactly how many bullets there are. And they get us set in, and we wait for about an hour. And this is a range, but it's in the woods. And what they have is, and they told us like, hey, we're gonna have these targets that are gonna get towed by. And so they have a line. You can't really see it. It's at night. You go out there. You're at night, laid in, ambush, claymores, the whole night, simulators, everything. And of course, when I wake up to the claymores going off because I've fallen asleep on my rifle. So when I wake up after the claymores blow off at 2 a.m, I'm like, ah, and then they tow the targets down, and it's just our AR-15, M16s, and we're all there, and they tow the targets, and everybody unloads 2 magazines, right? And then afterwards, they bring us all over to an area, and they pull those targets out, and they're like, okay, what does everybody think they did? We're like, we roasted those guys. They were like 6 bobbing things on a clothesline, basically. It's like just like reeling in your clothesline, watching the shirts bob by, except they're targets, full man-sized targets. And there's like a dozen of us firing 2 full round, 2 magazines of 60 rounds each. So it's like 720 rounds. And we got like, 2 rounds on the paper. Nobody, you know what I mean? Like nobody, all of us.
No lethal shots. No lethal
nothing,
shots.
nothing approaching.
These guys, those targets didn't even write home to mom and dad that they were scared.
Nope. They just the Viet Cong walked right through our ambush, and we missed them all. It was a great lesson in humility for sure, and shooting, especially at night. So yeah. There you go. Well, I guess maybe that's so for those of us who aren't sure what happened with Iran and dropping bombs, just because you pull the trigger and you get a big boomstick doesn't.
So is your theory that it was Kabuki theater?
I remain on the Kabuki theater side of the fence.
It seems suspect. A whole lot of, hey, we managed to make some political hay while not actually doing anything effectual. And as somebody who at times has to participate in a little theater, did we prevent World War III?
Yeah, to me, maybe, and I can make a case for it.
I would say that the theater probably prevented other less desirable outcomes.
Right, I'm with you. That's where I come down.
Is it bullshit? Yes. Was it our bullshit? Absolutely.
That's where I am. So
let's do it a little pomp and circumstance here.
Yeah, and I don't know if that makes me, does that fall into the conspiracy theory camp? I mean, I've made clear where I stand. We have the finest aluminum foil here in my house, but I don't know that I consider that so much conspiracy theory as I do just, what's it look like? Compared to
what is saber rattling? Is saber rattling, conspiracy theory, or are you just like, hey, we actually do have sabers here? Right.
Yeah, people were asking me about that. What do you think about that B2? Somebody asked me about that in a locker room last night playing hockey. I said, what do you think about that B2? I'm like, I don't know, man. I think it's great. Somebody and they came right here out of not far north of me. Like I'm not far from the Casey Airport,
mid Missouri.
Yeah, it's just north of here, and people were reporting on it when the B2s left, and I think I even saw somebody reporting before the B2s left. Somebody had reported on with all the stuff that you have now, people have access to. Somebody who tracks was looking at tankers, KC-135s. There are a very limited number of KC-135 tankers that can get up and, other things can tank off of. And somebody had been reporting like in the days prior, like, wow, we got a lot of KC-135s out over the ocean. So, for whatever that's worth.
Right.
And turned out to be, that's how they were making the trip.
We maybe stop telegraphing what we're going to do to people.
Yeah. So there you go. There's this week on plausible reasoning and how it works, and certainty, and the craziness that we're dealing with. But JV, what do you think?
We're now all certain that there was Epstein had no clients in travel.
So we're going to get to that. Okay, yes. So hey, while we're on, yes. So here we go. So we meant to talk about that. Holy smokes. Can you believe that after all that? Here's my problem. People are like, what's going on? I thought I recalled seeing, and I don't know if you did or if somebody else told me about this, but when the FBI did a raid, I thought I remember seeing stories, or again, that there were some things that went missing, and there was a safe found empty.
They seized documents, they seized videotapes, they seized digital recording devices. We seized all of that, and the problem is the story for me. The story keeps changing. Hey, there is no video of the video camera went out, and the officers fell asleep. Well, actually, here's the unredacted video, and it's like, well, this is like the same video that you would play if this was an Ocean's 11 movie, and you're going to use the magnet and put the picture up in front of the camera so that, like, while you're going down the hall, nobody can actually see it.
One of the Tom Cruise, meanwhile, Mission Impossible things, you know.
Yeah, it shows like, hey, nobody went into and out of his cell. But if you look at like Epstein's cellmate, the guy's an absolute gorilla. Like he makes you look like a Tinkerbell. Like he is just an absolute freaking monster. He was a former police officer who's in there, for sure not able to do that. Pam Bondi's going through the victims list because we don't want to release it and like expose the victims to greater exposure than what they well, you know, that doesn't exist either. And it's like, all right, well, the changing narrative and trying to memory hold this is deeply troubling. I'm sure that it implicates a lot of the power base of Washington, D.C., and that this is largely set up by the Mossad. That's my feeling that he was
I always have
intelligence.
I go with what I call working hypotheses until I've got, confirmation or disconfirmation. In fact, falsifiability, by the way, can be a powerful tool. And it's powerful, but it's powerful only in disconfirmation, not in confirmation.
Right.
You know what I mean? So, in any event, the thing to me was they ran on this, hey, we're going to publish the Epstein list. And then
the FK list and the MLK list.
Right. And then they came, and then, you get to this point, it was like people were calling for, hey, where is it? Where is it? Where is it? And yeah, I mean, you can't say, I remember, didn't she say at one point, the list is on my desk?
Yes.
I mean, like you can't say the list is on my desk and then be like, but there's no list.
There's no list. Yeah.
Like, yo, man, like, wow, stop pissing on my leg and telling me it's raining.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't say, you either have to come out then and say, you know what, I lied previously. When I said there was a list, I was lying. We were just talking shit. I did it for political reasons. Like, you either have to say that or you better shit a list.
Yeah. Or we need to see the, like, hey, this was what was put on my desk. I was told it was a list. Hey, I've been in leadership positions where people have given me like, hey, I got bad intel.
Right.
I think you've been in like, hey, I'm in charge. Someone tells you they're giving you something. You walk up to the microphone ready to talk, and you're like, hey, excuse me. I'm gonna have to hit him with the old razzle dazzle here and do a little fancy dancing.
It is.
You didn't give me the stuff.
It is not. It is certainly not doing any good for Pam Bondi's credibility. I can tell you that. I mean, we and you could say, and I'm all about like, hey, give lawyers a chance, and it takes.
Hold on. Wasn't Pam Bondi involved in his original trial down in Florida?
I don't think she was the AG at the time. I was trying to do some. I was asking.
She might have been the assistant AG in Florida.
Right, and that wouldn't necessarily mean like that was handled. Nobody. It wasn't handled as some big giant matter, of course. At the time, it was just, this local guy down in whatever, is a skis ball, and
right.
Whoever the local. Whatever the local DA is. I mean, that's how jurisdiction works. You know what I mean? Something happens in Westchester County, New York, the Manhattan DA doesn't give a crap, unless of course there's something going on that it crosses lines. But so there might not have been any reason for her to know or not. But boy, it stinks to high heaven. It's not a good look. It is not a good look.
Not a good look. Yeah, all of us conspiracy theorists are not real happy with Pam Cash.
It's and then to have Bongino come out and say that he's like, I'm going down there. I mean, here's the problem: if you're on the outside and you're like, hey, I'm going to go in there and kick ass and take names, you'd better if there's no lit. I mean, you'd better what's Ghislaine Maxwell in prison for?
Probably.
Usually
taxes or some bookkeeping. We couldn't get you on human trafficking, but
she's in jail for trafficking children in prostitution, but to no one. We don't have a single person who they've ever been trafficked to, only that they were trafficked, which is really weird in terms of proving that trafficking occurred. You'd have to there'd have to be somebody on the other end of, that's what trafficking means. Like they went there as a moral purpose, and then there would have to be somebody's on the other end of that.
Well, this is always my favorite of what am I being arrested for? Resisting arrest.
Right.
What preceded my resisting this arrest?
Right. Where is the lawfulness for what's the underlying predicate for the initial arrest?
Yeah. What's the Thatcher problem here?
Yeah. It's not looking good. But anybody.
It is. If I were Trump, the way that I would play this as a master politician is I would hang that list over everybody's head who is disagreeing and not going along with passing the big, beautiful bill, cutting the things because there's a lot of I'm just going to assume that there's a lot of the power base of Washington, D.C. that is implicated in this. Beat them over the head with it until I got what I wanted, and then double cross them and send them all to prison. But that's just me.
And let me add to it one other thing for anybody's knowledge about this is where I came to my comment about the list. But I would highly recommend Eric Weinstein is the older brother of Brett.
Yes.
He's a Harvard physics guy. Mm-hmm. And he went on a podcast. I think you know which one I'm talking about.
Yeah.
He went on and talked about, and it was a podcast that was ostensibly about a completely different subject, but he talked in detail about the first time he met Jeffrey Epstein. And I don't remember where that was, but it was in some context. And I don't remember why I was there. I didn't see the whole podcast. It was on, what's that guy, Williamson? Chris Williamson?
Chris Williamson, the British fella.
Yeah. I would highly recommend to everyone, if you get a chance, watch or listen to that Chris Williamson podcast.
I think that's Modern Wisdom. Is that what that's called?
Is that? Yeah, I think that might be right. Yes, I think you might be right on that. Well, listen to that podcast with Eric Weinstein, older brother of Brett, who does the Dark Horse podcast. I would say take a listen to Eric Weinstein talk about his meeting with Jeffrey Epstein.
Yeah.
And it's as interesting, a little bit chilling, but it tells me a lot, or at least I think it does. And I don't know if it will anybody else, but he talks about that meeting and how his takeaway from it, he's a very smart guy, got a degree from Harvard in physics, I think. Right. And he back when that probably meant a lot more than it does now. But he said that the one thing that came out of it for him was that this guy was clearly a construct. That, in other words, he talked about being a currency guy and all that, and Weinstein's no dummy. And so he's like, I went looking and I can't find a single trade this guy's ever done. I can't find this guy anywhere in the currency world. Where's his trades? Who are his clients? Where's his thing? And all of it is like, he's like, I knew enough about currency, people buying currency, to be like, I never heard of this guy. Who is this guy? Like, who's he represent? What institutional investors?
Yeah.
So that's all the nice way of saying
is like that Eric's an accomplished mathematician, as you have to be to do physics well. And he's like, Jeff couldn't do the math.
Right.
Like, hey, you can't do the stochastic analysis. You aren't a real thing.
Yeah, fundamentally, he talked to that guy, and as somebody who had enough math background to know quants, quantitative analysis, people call them quants, people who work in those fields, currency purchasing and all that stuff. and a quick conversation, which, by the way, would, for any of us who were involved in anything that we know well enough, it doesn't take me 5 seconds to see somebody, who's talking about helicopters and be like, that guy's bullshitting. You know what I mean? Like, no,
Right.
or whatever you know about, it's same for you, and all of us in particular fields.
Yeah.
And you would just know, you'd be like, listen, I don't know what the guy's background is or this or that, but I just know he doesn't have X, which would be a baseline thing you'd have to be in the game, to even be considered serious about that. And so Epstein clearly wasn't. He was a front. He was a front for something else. And then the real question becomes, if not, who's he a front for? What exactly? And then you look at all the ties, Elaine, and you go, oh, well, dad was Mossad, and all that stuff. And pretty quickly sums to dude's a cover for a honeypot, operation that's blackmailing people of power,
Yeah. And the other thing that is fascinating is he seemed to be mostly interested in politicians and scientists.
Yeah.
And that his New Mexico like the Caribbean island thing is what gets all the press. That was mostly for politicians, but he took all the scientists to New Mexico. Like, he had a huge ranch in New Mexico that he would bring scientists, and most people are like, well, why would they want to talk to scientists? It's like, well, if a foreign government wants to know, like, hey, what's going on, it is amazing how low level you can get somebody who has enough information to give very valuable information, so that through induction you can kind of figure out, like, hey, we've got enough dots here, we can fill in the rest.
People would be,
have you heard the Tim Walz accusation with the
yes, for sure. Yes.
Yeah, like, he's a complete freaking slappy at the time who gave the Chinese the operator's manual. Wasn't the construction manual. Hey, here's the operations manual for this tank. And from the operations manual, they were able to build their own tank.
People would be, I think, disheartened and maybe horrified to learn about some of the real life espionage cases and how they take place, how people are targeted, how they're, and it's interesting, even in the modern cases where we have, like, Americans who are prosecuted for, violations and stuff. You notice how you're always kind of surprised that it's somebody lower than you would have thought. Like, even Snowden, like, oh, I worked at NSA, but you're not like, he wasn't like a section chief.
No, he was a contractor.
Yeah, he was a contractor. And so, when you look at
not like top level, I mean, he is a very skilled programmer. He's a skilled computer guy, but it wasn't like, hey, this guy's been read in on everything.
Right.
He was like just a guy that was working on stuff.
And what people might be, or maybe not, be surprised to kind of take away from that is that the people who are obviously in the positions of trust and confidence and who have access to that kind of information are the first people who are going to be under suspicion. And so, if you're thinking about it from the perspective of a foreign hostile intelligence service, or from our perspective going after other countries, you don't go after the head guy. He's so hard to get to. He's surrounded. He's immediately going to be suspect. He's probably going to be the guy who loses his access. And so that's why.
What was it? One of the top spies during World War II was a janitor.
Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me. I mean, it'd be,
may have been the Cold War. I'll have to go back and look that up.
Yeah, and just to put a real to bring the imprimatur of truth to it, that must be true, because look at how hard the agents in Matrix went after the keymaster guy, the little guy with the keys.
Yes,
that's how you know what I'm telling you is true.
Yeah, yeah. I can open the doors. That's it.
There you go. JV, that's what we got, man. Epstein.